So yeah, today I want to talk about single-page applications and how we can integrate these with web content management to provide an alternative to content as a service. So, there we are. So the big market trend I'm seeing today is a move to a headless and microservices architecture, and with that, the rise of single-page applications. Single-page applications are not just used for web applications, but also increasingly for just regular websites. So who here uses SPAs today or is planning to use them? Can I see some hands? All right, good amount, good amount. So for those that do not know what an SPA is, perhaps some of the business folks sneaked into this room today. Mr. T is upset with you. Now, in all seriousness, let me just read you from Wikipedia. I think this describes it very well. A single-page application is a web application or website that interacts with the user by dynamically rewriting the current page rather than loading entire new pages from the server. This approach avoids interruption of the user experience between successive pages, making the application behave more like a desktop application. So SPAs, basically, because of how they work, a lot of the logic is moved from the backend to the SPA. They provide a clear separation of front-end and back-end, and where typically the SPA handles things like the UI, the interactions, the state, and the back-end handles things like data, querying, processing, and exposes that via APIs. So why would you use an SPA? There are multiple reasons, and first and foremost, a big reason I see is to separate release and deploy cycles of the front end and the CMS. It's a lot easier to just deploy some updates to JavaScript and HTML to your web server or to your content delivery network than it is to do release and deploy of the average CMS. Another reason is because a lot of logic is moved from the CMS, the delivery tier of the CMS, to your SPA, that the front-end developers no longer, or less so, need to work and learn a proprietary framework of the CMS. Another reason is, again, because the logic is moved, is reduce lock-in. And more reasons are like a broader initiative to move to like a microservices architecture. Rick, do you have any additional reasons you like to add?
I think you missed one, which for ING is important at least, and I think for a lot of other companies from a business perspective, I think in general the experience is better in a single-page app. If you look at traditional websites, it's fine if you're only consuming content, but we are so focused on experience these days, and a single-page app is what gives you a great experience. And if you look at it from a technical perspective, I think we are all working in an omnichannel way. If you want to use the same data in a mobile app as in your website, you need to have an API anyway. And what's a way to build something on top of an API? It's a single-page app. So
couldn't agree more.
To the story.
Thanks for that. So those are all very good reasons. Now, what we've seen, or what I've seen mostly in the field, the kind of integration approach, because of how SPAs work, how they work with APIs, the logical and straightforward approach is content as a service. However, content as a service comes with some challenges. Typically, to move to or to use a single-page application, typically that's an IT-driven decision, and often these teams are not aware the kind of limitation this brings to the business, such as having no out-of-the-box CMS preview. And the reason behind this is because the CMS is no longer powering the end delivery of the pages. The SPA is doing this. It has no knowledge of how that page should look like and how it can generate that preview. There's some workarounds, but it's definitely not something you will get out of the box. Also, drag and drop, control over the presentation. This kind of functionality is typically brought or powered by the delivery of the CMS. So once it's no longer in control of that, you lose out on that functionality. And finally, no control over where content is displayed and appears on the front end. And a way to resolve this is to associate metadata with the content, but then you end up garbling the content with metadata, which is not ideal. Now, it's important to stress that these are all architectural limitations, so it's not necessarily something that Bloomreach Experience struggles with. You'll see this with other systems as well, because these are essentially architectural limitations. Fortunately, we found a better solution. And thanks to, I'm not sure if they're in the room, I didn't see them yet, but thanks to, in part, our friends over at Authentic. So we came up with a few solutions. Where do I need to point this? Yeah, that's better. So there are basically 4 scenarios and solutions, and they range in complexity from, on the left, low in complexity to more complex on the right. And the same for the kind of control and the business value they provide to the business. With on the left, low in control and business value to more on the right. So let me just quickly take you through them one by one. So first, content as a service. That is basically taking the raw content over the APIs and consuming that by the SPA. And you can do that with the Content REST API that Bloomreach Experience offers. I'm going too fast. Another one is hybrid. And what you're basically doing there is you say some pages are powered by the SPA, and other pages or parts of the pages are powered by the CMS. Now, this has some obvious disadvantages, such as that for the pages that are powered by the SPA, you still do not have that control, and for the pages that are powered by the CMS, you still have to develop those in the CMS, and you can't do that in like the front-end framework of your choice. Now, the other 2, those are the ones, the last 2 approaches that today we want to spend more time on. I'm going to talk a little bit about experience as a service. But before I do that, Rick is going to dive deeper into component-level integration, and also, before he does that, give some background on which SPA they're using, which framework, and why. So take it away, Rick.
Thanks. Yeah, so component-level integration. Before I can start, I need to bore you with some background of my company, ING. Because I think there is no silver bullet in technology. What I'm presenting here is which works for us, and I want to try to give you kind of an understanding why this works for us, because this wouldn't work for every company. I think for those of you who don't know ING, ING is a bank which operates in a lot of countries. But what people usually are not aware of, because when you're a consumer of ING, you know ING as a customer in one country, and you might think it's a global bank. But in reality, if you look at how we operate, there's a lot of freedom in all the countries. And this is an example of 6 websites of 6 different countries. And, well, it's a bit small, but you can see that they are all different. This has grown historically, and there's a big disadvantage with coming with this, and that's the technology choices. If you look at our landscape, almost every web framework ever invented is being used in one of our countries. And from a strategy perspective, as a company, we want to move away from this. We want to start to become more one bank, and we want to start to share as much as we can. And that's kind of hard with this technology. So we needed a technology to fix that. We looked at how can we fix this. So, okay, maybe we just take one technology. Yeah? Let's move to React. There's a challenge with that as well, because this slide is actually from last year, and if I would write the slide this year, but probably I wouldn't say React anymore, but Preact maybe. And if you look at the change speed of all those countries, it's different per country, but it will not be months. So if we decide to move to React with all the countries such that we can share, by the time we are at that technology in all the countries, I think we are 5 years from now, no one knows what React is anymore. So for us, there was only one way of starting to share, and that's based on standards. And this clicker is, there we go. And for us, there was a very interesting standard to solve this, and it's called Web Components. And Web Components kind of works well with Hippo, but I will get to that. But first, I want to give you a little background on what it is, Web Components. It's a standard which basically gives you 4 elements, and if you combine this, we tend to call it Web Components. The first and most important one is custom element. And what custom element allows you to do, it allows you to create your own element in the browser, and as soon as you declare it like this, it's available. So you can put, in this example, you can put a my element anywhere in the DOM, and as a user in the browser, you will see a big hello and small I am a custom element, which is the HTML I put in and attached to this element. So this allows me to start to work with my own components. But I want to do more. I want to take that HTML out and I want to do some templating, because in reality, I don't only want to put HTML in there, I often want to put some data in that HTML. Some things might be conditional, so I need a templating engine. Well, that's there in the standard as well. It's called HTML template. And HTML template allows you to define your templates and do all the stuff you would do in any templating engine. But again, it's a standard built into the browser. Now, if you want to make real components with this, they need to look good. We need to be able to style them. They need to have behavior with JavaScript. But we had that goal of using one component, building it centrally within ING maybe, and putting it in 6 websites with 6 different looks and feels, 6 different style sheets, 6 different JavaScript frameworks. So we need some way to do that. Well, there's another thing in the standard, which is called the shadow DOM. And what the shadow DOM does, it will allow you to add something to the DOM which will not be part of the DOM. It's similar to virtual DOM in React, but again in the browser. So your browser will make sure that whatever you do with the shadow DOM, it's contained in that part. In this example, I make a paragraph red. The result of this will not be that all paragraphs in the page will be red, only those paragraphs which are inside this component. This is very important to do styling in a proper way. And last but not least is HTML import. And what HTML import allows you to do is take all that code you write in your component, put it in an HTML file, and import that in any application or page wherever you need it. These 4 combines are web components. An example of what a page would look like this, is you see the page at the right. This could be a simple mortgage page we create. And the HTML markup is to the left. And I will zoom into some bits of it. If you look at this could be the entire page, so all the code we need, because it's doing a lot of imports. So if you look at the head, we first import web components. That's because not all browsers have implemented the standard yet, so we need to implement something to fix that. And then we implement the 4 components which we use on this page. And let's zoom into that one. And one is page digital. In this example, that's the web component which contains all other components. And what this web component does, it creates the entire markup of the page. So it might put a menu on top, it will put a header on top, it could put a footer at the bottom, and it just kind of gives your framework for your page. And then the last thing remaining is that we actually have a web component, for instance, a product card. And as you can see, this web component is also, it has no markup or nothing. It just has the content which you see on the page as properties, and the web component which we import will do the rest. If you look at this HTML, it's quite simple. So I would like to demo how this works with Hippo, because I think they kind of work together very nice. So what I did, this is the page I just shown with that simple HTML, and it's managed in Hippo. So I can go into the CMS. And what I like about this approach is for Hippo, this is just HTML. So all the functionality I normally have available in Hippo is still available. So I can drag these components around. It's no problem. Just works. I can do inline editing of the content, and that should also work. Let's see if I change some text. And so as you can see, there's not much of a difference between the experience you normally would have with Hippo or the experience with web components. But what gonna do now, and this is what I like, because all the actual markup is in the web components, I can replace the web components easily. So I will check out another branch of my web components. Oh, wait, let's just like this, which is a branch I created for today. And if I now go to another page in the channel manager, it will get a different definition of my web components, and suddenly I have a completely different website. So I could have a different menu, I have a different footer. The same goes for the site which is running. It's just a completely different website. Content editing still works. I can still drag around these components, and I can still do inline editing if I want.
And to clarify, this doesn't touch any of the code in Hippo, right? When you do
No.
the checkout. No.
Oh, the checkout I did is just only static files of JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, which are completely outside of Hippo. I think I may have a slide on that actually, which probably is the next slide. This is the setup which I just demoed. So what I did, I put Nginx in front. I have a normal Hippo installation, but the Hippo installation only has one component. That one I can show as well. If you look in the CMS, that's where it's a bit limited. If you look at the components I have available here, it's only the web component. It's the only component we give to the content editors. And with this component, you can select any web component we have, and it will just render the content of a document attached to it into that web component. That's the trick. And yeah, that's how we work. And what this gives us next to this flexibility is that if you look at how most of our changes are more often in styling and in look and feel than actually in our document types. So with this, we have experience with deploying front-end code and testing front-end code automatically from our apps, which allows us to put this kind of code in production as many times a day as we want. So for instance, we have days where we go live with the entire front-end 14 times a day. It's not a problem. In this setup, we can do the same for all the components we use with our CMS, which for us gives us a lot of agility of changing everything. Important thing there is that I kind of connected everything by convention. So there's no real code saying these are the web components you can use with this document. It's all very loose. So I can use any document type, I can connect it to any web component, and depending on the web component, it will either look good or not, but you will see that in the channel manager, but it's total freedom. So if we introduce a new document type, fine, we can use it with the existing web components. If I want to change the web component, it's all fine. That's how we think we can do a public website and how we are doing it now. But that page digital quite often can be a single page app. And for that scenario, this would kind of work. But if Page Digital is a smart single-page app and it understands deep linking, it might still work, but I think we are kind of missing something. And for that, I'm gonna have Robbert continue.
We have another solution. So that's a nice segue into experience as a service. So that's like the last approach of the 4 approaches I laid out earlier. So experience as a service. What is it? It basically offers native-like CMS experience while using an SPA. And with native-like, I mean the same kind of authoring experience you have when the CMS is also doing the delivery. When the CMS owns the glass, or like Mike earlier this morning said, when it's experience-led. So you have all the functionality like out-of-the-box integrated CMS preview. You have drag and drop, control over the presentation. You can create pages in the CMS, and it might seem like a very small marginal point, but I've actually seen situations where they were using content as a service. And to create a landing page, they would have to create a route in the single page application. So that task involved a front-end developer, while it should be just an editorial task. And finally, also, you can use all of the great enterprise-grade features such as personalization, A/B testing, and so on. Now, the use case for experience as a service is when you have a more complex SPA, when component-level integration might be more challenging to use, and also when you're using frameworks such as Angular 4 that need to be in control of the DOM and don't even work with that other approach. So let's move into the demo. I've got another demo set up right here. And I'll dive into the architecture afterwards to give you an understanding of how it actually works. All right, so I got my React application right here. And it's a very simple website, but the idea here is it's more like a tech demo. It's not a full-fledged website. And to prove that's actually a React application, let me view the source. As you can see here, it's just some static HTML for the header and the footer. And then I have like one div element where the application is bootstrapped to that contains all the banners and the content and so on. And then I have a bundle.js, which is actually the React application. Now, so far that's nothing too crazy. Where it gets exciting is as soon as I go into the CMS. So I have the one-to-one preview. So this is my my React application that you're seeing. The React application is powering this preview, so it's one-to-one. You don't have to maintain the HTML in multiple places, and it's an entirely accurate preview. Now, the exciting stuff is that you still have the CMS functionality here. So if I click on the Edit Content button, I can change any of the titles. I can save it, and I immediately see my changes. I have drag and drop that I can use. And I can add new pages. So if I go to page and say new, and click on create, then I can create new pages and just drag and drop any of my components onto that page and create my page that way. It will immediately be available as soon as I publish it on my single page application. And you also can use things like personalization. So if I go back to the home page, I've got a banner right here. And over on the left, I have my personalized variants. So I have one for the Wednesday special that you can see. So you can preview those. If I switch to the alter ego, what you'll see is that you can also have the preview here, and it also works on the live site. At the same time, you also have the notion of preview. So while I've updated my title of that banner, if I go to the live website, it will not be there yet. So let me try to open that page that I just created. I think it's my awesome new page. It will not be there yet, but as soon as I publish my changes, that page should be visible. So you still have that same notion of live versus preview. So pretty much the same experience you would have when you're using the CMS natively. All right, let's go back into my presentation. So how does it work?
You want me to support it?
Yeah, let me just put this. Oh wait, let me because I'm just gonna stand over here. So how does it work? So it exposes pages or the experience through the Experience API, and that is then consumed by the single page application. Now that's for the live side. For the preview, there are two additional things. The SPA powers the CMS preview, so you have that accurate preview in the CMS. And to provide all that CMS functionality, like the in-context editing and the drag and drop, the API returns also some metadata that the SPA then inserts in the HTML for rendering all that CMS functionality. Now all of this is powered by the Experience API, and that's basically a framework-agnostic REST API that exposes the aggregated page structure. So it can be used with any SPA framework, whether that's Angular or React, Vue. There are so many nowadays. It also includes any of the associated content on that page, and all the containers and the components within those containers, and any variants for personalization or A/B testing. And finally, also the CMS metadata. That's important for the CMS functionality. So for the live site, the architecture is as follows. So over here I have a page with some HTML, and that's rendered by the single page application. And a header, a footer, a main section with a banner, a product grid, and a news list. Now, those are all SPA components. So those are defined in the SPA. Now, once the SPA initializes, it does a call to the Experience API, and that gets the page structure and the content from the Experience API. So basically, it's just some JSON that it gets back, and it tells the SPA, I want you to render a main section with these components and a column with apparently no components. So it tells the SPA what to render on that page. And it can be, for every page, it can be different, depending on what the authors put on that page. Now, it's a little different. So these can be managed in the CMS, as you saw in the demo. It's a little different once you go into preview. So over here, I have a user, a CMS user, who previews the page in Bloomreach Experience. And that SPA is loaded via the base layout.ftl. That's the only free marker template you would have to set up. It's basically just loads the SPA using the JavaScript, like the bundle.js, or however you want to load the SPA. Alternatively, you could even run it on your Node server and reverse proxy it into the CMS, but that introduces some security risks. So I would stick to this approach. Now, it then serves back that HTML to the user, and then the browser starts loading the SPA, starts initializing, and then as the SPA initializes, again, does the same thing, calls the Experience API, gets the content, the CMS, but now because it's preview mode, it also gets the metadata from the Experience API. So it doesn't do that on the live site to not put any unnecessary markup in your HTML. Now the SPA then renders that page, and additionally, it takes that metadata and turns that into HTML comments that it puts in the HTML. So those are some HTML comments at the start of a container, at the end of a container, the start of a component, at the end of the component. That's actually what we also do in FreeMarker in Hippo. So it lends itself very well to with the SPAs. So to kind of recap briefly, we have 4 scenarios and solutions. They range in complexity, but also in the kind of control and value they provide to the business. So with content as a service, you're very limited. You basically go back to a form-based way of managing your website. Fortunately, with 2 of the approaches we discussed today, you can still have that control and manage your website in a very intuitive way, and while you manage the templates in the front-end framework of your choice. So yeah, that's really what I wanted to share with you today. If you want to learn more, if you want to look at some code, feel free to drop me an email or the general email. Sales of Bloomreach works too. I'll be around for the brain dates, and I'll just be walking around too. So feel free to tap my shoulder and ask more. I'm happy to talk more on the topic. And I think now we should have some time for questions.
Any questions?
Hi. I was wondering how the last approach would work with the sitemap that is exposed from the CMS.
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's basically a choice you can make. So one thing how we did it with the React application I showed is that for any URL, that you request. So say I go to /news, it would try to do that same request to Hippo to get basically that page back through the Experience API. So basically, it takes that path, the path of your URL, and puts that path in the query to Bloomreach for the Experience API. So then you get the news page back, or whichever other page you're visiting. So that's a way, and then you're still maintaining the sitemap in Bloomreach. And another way is you could also expose all the sitemap items, whether those are content-driven or whether those are clearly defined, and expose those over an API to basically insert those as dynamic routes into the application. That could also work. I chose the former approach because it was, for me, easier to set up.
So have you managed to make the experience as a service approach work in Angular using ahead of time compilation? Because it seems like JSON is going to dictate conditionally what's render, but when you're using ahead of time, there's no renderer engine in the browser. So does this approach work there?
Yeah, so it's basically with server-side rendering, right? Yeah, because it's the same with if you use server-side in React. So the challenge there, or the kind of approach we took there, Staples is also taking this approach we ran into there, where they use, I believe it's Electrode for server-side rendering. And basically, if it's server-side rendering, yeah, then you run into some challenges. So what we do there is we have some, not really server-side rendering, another way of rendering it for the preview. And then for the live site, it uses that server-side rendering, and that is basically a cached version of the API it gets back. So you can still take that approach. The only area where you'll run into some challenges is in the preview, is when you try to make these changes, because the ahead of time will just be a static version of that, which you cannot change. So you would have to apply that workaround that you have also a client-side version of that application for preview mode.
Thank you. Any other questions? I don't know if everyone heard, but the question is for the audience, whether anyone has seen something like this with,
Well, other platforms out there.
Okay, so the same solution with other products, basically. Has anyone seen this?
Yeah, no, it's a good point, Wilder. It's something we developed. It's relatively new, and I haven't seen it with other products. I think how the channel manager works lends itself very well for this approach, and it's something that I haven't seen anywhere else in the field. So we think this is definitely something differentiating. But yeah, if it's not, then I'd love to know.
Okay, thank you both. That's then the end of the presentation, I guess. It's a bit earlier than expected, but I think nobody would mind having lunch a bit earlier than expected. After lunch, there's going to be an amazing presentation here, so I would advise you to come back, but I'm not going to say much more about that yet. Okay. Enjoy.